You know, this one's a little different. Normally, I stick to the PlayStation 2, a system that defined a generation of gamers and gave us some of the most iconic shooters of the early 2000s. But after diving deep into Killzone for the PS2, it only felt right to follow the trail and see what happened next. Not just on a new console, but on the go. Today, we're stepping into Killzone Liberation for the PlayStation Portable. And while I don't usually cover other platforms, the PlayStation Portable always felt like a spiritual successor, a little brother to the PS2, a portable that carried the same DNA, just miniaturized. Released in November 2006, Killzone Liberation wasn't just another handheld shooter. It was Guerrilla's bold attempt to reimagine their gritty sci-fi warzone within the technical limits and opportunities of Sony's little powerhouse. The handheld landscape at that time was interesting. Nintendo was dominating with the DS, while Sony aimed high with the PSP, basically saying, let's put a PlayStation 2 in your pocket. And for a lot of us, it felt exactly like that. The graphics, the sound, the production values. This was serious hardware for serious gamers. But here's the curveball. Liberation isn't just a first-person shooter like its console predecessor. Because the PSP had just one analog stick, Guerrilla took a creative detour and delivered a third-person, isometric-style tactical action game instead. You control Jan Temple, yep, the same hardened ISA soldier from the original Killzone, on a mission to disable the Helghast's last offensive led by General Metrak. The camera angle means it plays more like a top-down strategy, kind of like Syndicate or Breach. It's slower, more deliberate, and surprisingly satisfying once you get used to it. So, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the missing stick. Sony's biggest misstep with the PSP, and I will die on this hill, was releasing the system with only one analog nub. Just one. It forced developers to get creative with control schemes that frankly should have been intuitive. And that's where Liberation stands out. Instead of cramming a first-person shooter into awkward controls, Guerrilla adapted. They took what worked and built something entirely new around it. Still, you can't help but dream. If the PSP had shipped with dual analogs, this could have been a true portable Killzone 2. The hardware had the muscle, it just needed the thumbs. Liberation strikes a balance between action and strategy. You manage cover, issue squad commands, and issue an arsenal that feels authentic to the Killzone universe, from the ISA's clean tech to the Helghast's industrial grit. Missions encourage planning, and enemy AI is genuinely aggressive for a handheld game. And visually, wow, for 2006, it's polished. Particle effects, dynamic lighting, the signature red eye glow of the Helghast, it all looks incredible on that little 480 by 272 screen. The cutscenes, animated in that gritty comic book style, also fit perfectly, stylistically distinct yet true to Killzone tone. Fun trivia: the game used the Havoc's physics engine, one of the first high-profile PSP titles to do so. It also supported ad hoc and infrastructure multiplayer up to 6 players, a technical feat for the PSP era. And get this, Guerrilla actually released free downloadable content for Killzone Liberation shortly after launching, adding new missions and even expanding the story. Remember, this was 2006, years before regular DLC became the norm. Unfortunately, a planned Chapter 5 update never arrived due to the PSP's infrastructure shutdown, leaving the story somewhat unresolved. Still, the game's quality and innovation left a lasting impression. It's often remembered as one of the PSP's top 10 titles, and a hint of what handheld shooters could have been if Sony had fully embraced dual analog sticks. So, Killzone Liberation might not have been the traditional FPS sequel fans expected or wanted, but it showed how to adapt without losing identity. And for me, this feels like a natural bridge in my reviews, from the PS2's Killzone to the closest thing we ever got to a portable PS2 experience. Guerrilla had turned a hardware limitation into a creative statement. If you owned a PSP, this one was and still is essential. And if you have an Android device with Nether SX2 on it, this game looks fantastic. Killzone Liberation proves that even when Sony forgot a stick, Guerrilla never lost their grit. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. This is Dan Gnadt, the PS2 guy. Stay retro.